now making way for our speech by Graham Morenis.
Thank you so much, Peter. This is what today looks like. Hopefully it will happen the way I expected. We have a new speaker who's here and an old speaker who may not be. Danny Botkins taking care of some goats. But George Tolosis is here from SGIC, which makes me very happy because I really, really wanted somebody from SGIC. I want to let you know what we're up to, and we can talk about that, and then we're going to do a lot of community activities where you'll have a lot of opportunity to present. So let me see if I can learn to be. Yes, trying to link slides together is always interesting. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Graham Morenis. I started really trying to do stuff about the climate around 2015 on the scale of the state, working with 350 Mass, who are supported by the Better Future Project, who also do the Climate Crew Project. In schools, working with student climate clubs and organizing faculty climate committees. But then I thought, what are we going to do here locally that can make a difference? And that's what got me here today. Just a little housekeeping. I'm going to be throwing a lot of stuff your way. If you go to resilientgreenfield.org and you click on News and Events, you're going to see a thing called Launch Materials. All the slides are there, from the morning event and from the afternoon event. And at the bottom of that, comments are open today. So if you have your own comments that you want to make about what happens today and you want to share them even with the people who are not here, I encourage you to do that through that website, resilientgreenfield.org, News and Events, Launch Materials. Because this is a peer-to-peer, what? Robin?
No, I was just pointing to.
Oh, okay. Because this is a peer-to-peer learning thing, I want us to take an opportunity if there's any climate-related events that we want to share with the community. So, fire, hold up your light, your phones, if you have an event that you'd like to share with us. There are going to be a lot of things that happen during the course of this thing. I'm going to invite you to hold your phones up, grab a QR code, and fill out a little form with your event, and at the end of this event here, we will share all the things that people have filled out. It won't be a stand up and talk, it'll be a what did you share? See, I'm kind of like forcing you to use technology in devious ways. So there is this Earth Day celebration on April 21st at the Energy Park. That's the first event I'd like you guys to be hip to. And then the second one is that there's a Security and Sustainability Forum, and that's all the way over on May 15th, which feels like another century from now. But those are all reasons to fill out the app and do this. Now I know that you guys are able to multitask, so I'm not going to wait for you to finish writing in the things that you want to share, but continue on. Why are we here today? There are three sectors in my research. This is one of those do your own research things, because I'm not an expert. But there are three sectors that I think have a role together to play in making our community more resilient to climate change. What government does, represented by Chief Robert Strahan. What nonprofits do, represented perhaps by the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, which has some nonprofit members as well as some government members, as well as some citizen members. And then what the public does, represented perhaps by Redistro over there, which is a mutual aid organizing group, and represented by those of you who stick with us as we take this journey together. So the three questions that we're asking today: how are we adapting to climate impacts here in Greenfield and the surrounding towns? How can we become more resilient to extreme weather events, and also you can tie other things to this, like fires and diseases? And what shall we do as a crew hub, which is this new role that we are going to be playing for the community to the extent that we can find appropriate opportunities to do it? I want to start with the difference between these two words, adaptation and resilience. And I'm not going to read this aloud, and you can look at the slides later. I'm just going to summarize. That adaptation is when we modify our systems to minimize the risks. So when you make your roads less likely to wash out, when you make your water treatment plants less likely to flood, that's adaptation. But when you connect to your neighbors, when you create systems in place for emergency medical care, and then when the people in the community do some prior training so they can be of use, that's resilience. What you're going to hear from our speakers about is that there's a lot of adaptation that's been taking place for longer than most of us even know. There's a lot of things if we don't ask, we don't find out. But people have been hip to the climate crisis and for the impact it's going to have on us for more than 10 years. And in fact, we have a whole sustainable Greenfield master plan caring about that. But we're also going to discover that there's things that we as individual citizens need to do so that we don't have the kind of devastation that happened in, say, Asheville, North Carolina, be any worse than it needs to be. So let's start with climate adaptation. I'm taking a breath. Everybody good? Okay, I'm a teacher, so like launching into piling things into people's heads is my natural state. What is the city's role in climate adaptation? So the Greenfield Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Resiliency Plan, say that with me 5 times, I don't even have to, articulates these 3 things that we can expect. More extreme heat and extreme temperature fluctuations, leading people to have to go to cooling centers or warming centers. Very heavy precipitation events, floods and things, like the picture that was showing up of the Bridge of Flowers when you walked in, interspersed with very dry periods where you end up with fires and droughts, like we're in one now, even though we may not all know it, and stronger storms with higher winds to knock down trees and cut out power and do all those things. Everybody's aware that this is happening. This is what we have to adapt to. Recently, Laura Wondolowski, who is our City Council Chair, spearheaded the creation of a climate emergency resolution. And it was passed. So our city government says we are in a climate emergency now. What does it mean to say that, right? There's the whole Wizard of Oz thing where you say, great, now you have courage. It's what we do with this information that matters. They can raise grants, and get grant funding based on having this being signed up, but also they can talk to the citizens about, we're trying to do this new initiative. Can you show up and help us? Can you vote for the new change in the budget, whatever it happens to be? Citizens have a critical role to play, and this is signaling, citizens, come help. What is the public's role in climate adaptation? This is my little Richard window here. In the country, 70% of people say climate change is happening, so they have that information in their heads. But only 54% say it's a major threat to the country's well-being. That's knowledge. Information only comes into knowledge when you understand it. Obviously, it's hard to imagine that you would say it's happening, but it's not a major threat. But yet there's that gap. And only 37% of people say it should be a top priority for President and Congress. Well, if you got to 54%, it's a major threat, but then you aren't willing to go the next step and say we should elect somebody to do something about it, there's a gap there. So that Overton window is where the public's perception is and where the gaps are between what we're willing to say, what we're willing to understand, and what we're willing to do about it. And those gaps exist also in government, and they also exist in how nonprofits are organized. According to our resiliency plan, this is a June 2021 plan, they're saying Greenfield's informal community leaders, networks, SGIC, Greenfield Tree Committee, Resilient Greenfield, which is behind almost everything here. All roads lead to Resilient Greenfield. That's a special thing we have in this community. Not every community has that. Very few communities have that. How can we leverage that history? When Mitch Anthony was talking in the first morning event, he was talking about how this was the Valley of the Hippies. And the Valley of the Hippies had certain beliefs about community. And we have what we have today because of those beliefs. And Renaissance community and other places like that. But you know, there's a lot of history here, and we need to carry that forward and renew it for a new generation. So Resilient Greenfield has just been a really critical partner. Their focus is not on organizing people for resilience. They're more focused on the natural environment and some other projects like housing. But we're doing something a little bit different, and so a lot of people are just asking, well, we already have Greenfield, why do we need Resilient Greenfield? We are doing this work with their blessing, and hopefully we'll do some collaboration between the two organizations in the future. Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee is a result of us having a master plan, and then some people saying, gee, maybe there should be people who help that plan. In fact, it was part of the plan to have an implementation committee. How many people here know Isaac Asimov's foundation? Just a few. So a couple more, right? So Harry Seldon comes up with this plan for how we can recover from the dissolution of the empire, but then he's got to create this second foundation to kind of watch that happen and give little adjustments to the Jenga in case it's about to fall down or after it does. So the implementation committee goes, okay, back in 2017, whenever this thing was made, they said we wanted to go and make this happen, but you know, they didn't sufficiently emphasize climate change. Not because the people on the committee didn't know about climate change, but because the public, at that point, the Overton window was all left shifted. They weren't ready to volunteer to sign up for that. Well, now the Overton window is in a different place. So now we've got to tweak that master plan to cover climate change more. And that's the work of this implementation committee. So the public's role, right, is to track the work of that committee, be on that committee, and when the committee does a call for people to come and help and volunteer or give testimony at some event at John Tom Center, show up and do that. Because government itself can't handle this, the scale is too big. So George, since you're here right now, I was wondering if you're willing to lead off the speakers. You can wait and do it at the end if this is too terrible. But I would love to have you right now speak to what is the SGIC up to and what should people do about it. Would you be willing?
Sure. Want me to come up?
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll put a timer. Hi, everybody. Good to have everybody here. I'm going to try to, I'm old school, so I have no electronic information. But I'm going to try to cram about 15 years of information into 10 minutes. So please give me the speed up or the stop. When necessary, I can go to the panel Q&A part.
Do you want me to get the computer out of the way?
It's okay, thank you. So, in 2011, the town needed to have a new master plan. It's a Massachusetts requirement for towns to have master plans, and so it had been a couple decades or so since we had it. Excuse me. It's technically a planning board document. So the chair of the planning board at that time, Roxanne Wiedegardner, and the city planner, Eric Twarr, who was still in that role, presently decided we wanted to have a sustainable master plan. And so went to a consultant saying that's the kind of thing we wanted to have. And so that was followed by 2 years, starting in 2012, of very active community involvement. There was an advisory committee of 30 or so core people, and then there was multiple events where the public was involved, giving input and reaction to drafts and that kind of thing. And the consultants commented on how vigorous, how much of the community engagement was. So then it was, the master plan was completed in 2014. It went to effect. It was approved by the planning board. It was endorsed by the city council and the mayor, so that's not technically required. And it's 336 pages, and these are the 7 chapters of the master plan. which are housing, land use, economic development, transportation, natural, historic, and cultural resources, education, and lastly, public facilities, services, and energy. So this is quite a tome, but it's very comprehensive. And so, as was mentioned by Graham, within the plan was the creation of an implementation committee. And that was created in 2015. And he showed you some of the from the charter, some of the charge for that. And so it's an 11-person committee. It's intentionally made up of, there are 3 department heads: Public Works, Energy, Sustainability, and Planning. There's a city councilor, there's a planning board rep, there's a youth serving organization or school rep, and then 5 members of the public. And it says implementation committee, but it says in the purpose and goals, it's responsible for coordinating, basically. So we've discussed this for 10 years or more, how we work, and it's a very varied, but it talks about identifying, recommending, implementing, and to foster a vital, sustainable, and resilient community by addressing oil depletion and climate change crisis, and the 3 interlocking aspects of sustainability, the economy, the environment, and society. And I'll disagree a little bit with Graham, because I think, as he attended the meeting the other day, I think that the committee and the master plan did anticipate the climate crisis, and of course anticipates things are going to evolve and change. But I think that was a core through thread within the master plan. And as far as member knowledge, it talks about environmental sustainability is inherently a comprehensive and wide-reaching area. So committee members, we try to have a breadth of knowledge from across many disciplines, and they're listed. So what have we done in the past 10 years? Activities have involved, again, it can be pretty broad, maintaining a high profile of the master plan. And that has resulted not just through our efforts, but things that have happened are the master plan has become integrated into the city department plans and budgets. It's become a frequent reference for the city councilors. It's become, into the city government, so sustainability and resilience has informed all aspects of growth and development. There's also the energy and sustainability was a position when the master plan took effect, and then became a department. So I think just affirming how vital that role is. And it's also been something that's been very helpful in grant writing to utilize the document. The committee has also been tracking progress on the goals of the master plan, which obviously are many, and many different sizes of goals and duration of achievements. Also have done a lot of community engagement, and that's involved special events. We've had people come to, and also people coming to our meetings. And I really want to emphasize the interplay with the public is meant to be a dialogue, and it has been. It's not just informing people here at the other. It's a continuous dialogue, hearing from people, with the intention to inform the public, but also to inspire volunteers, like we're talking about here. So people might have something they're passionate about, and they might take on an activity or be part of a group or a garden that's doing things. Because there's just one thing we've experienced is such a wonderful public-private collaboration in this town. We have Greenfield, we have sorry, I'm checking my notes here. We have
Tree committee?
say again?
Tree committee?
The tree committee, that was on there, yes, thank you very much. And the tree committee is interesting, because the tree committee, when I moved to town 20-something years ago, was an actual official city or town then entity, and it faded. And then a group of volunteers started up again. So it exists. It's very vigorous. It's working toward goals within the master plan. It has a wonderful collaborative relationship with the DPW. But it's a group of volunteers. It has no, town affiliation officially. So it's another good example of that. And also rejuvenators. I don't know if people have heard of that, but when you see or sit on the metal benches downtown, that was a volunteer group that put those together and literally put them together and put them in place. We've also had guest speakers to our meetings to try to expand our knowledge and again have that give and take with having master plan goals filter out into activities and us learning more about what's happening. There have been some goals that, as we call it, didn't have a home, so we would try to figure out how can that come to fruition. One example of accomplishments I was going to mention is we have a complete streets policy for the city. That actually went through a volunteer bicycle coalition for Greenfield, then to the SGIC, and then to the planning board, and then was approved, or actually it went into policy, it's not an ordinance, so that was approved by the mayor. So again, an example of something that didn't have an exact place within government that would take care of putting this together, this draft together, and trying to find a way to move that forward.
What's complete streets? What is it?
Thank you. Complete Streets is an approach to transportation that the street is meant to be accommodating to all forms of transportation, not just automobiles or trucks, or not just, so it's supposed to accommodate people who are using bike or other personal means of transportation, pedestrians, public transit. So it's meant to accommodate all those things equally, so people have equal access and safety. So, and we've had that in place for quite a while now. Last thing we're doing, because it's been over 10 years since that was implemented, we have been working on chapter updates. And a couple of the chapters, land use and natural, historical, cultural, we just went through a process this past year with the Conway School, and some of their students worked with a subgroup of SGIC to put together updates on those plans. That's currently come to the planning board for consideration and approval. We're actually at the planning board meeting this coming Thursday. We're going to be discussing those drafts for the first time. And we're right now in the process of working on the economic development plan and trying to find out a way to have a consultant work with that. And we supposedly have a meeting this coming Thursday with someone just to start to explore that possibility. So I'm sorry if that was a lot in a rush. I have a whole list of accomplishments, which I don't have time to list right now, but if you're interested, ask her what you want. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so George is the planning representative to the Sustainable Greenfield Implementation Committee, and I'm the planning, vice chair of the planning board, George, is it?
No, I'm chair of the planning board.
Chair of the planning board.
I'm vice chair. I'm the planning board representative to the SGIC, and I'm vice chair.
Vice chair of the SGIC. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears. All of that stuff, just take a breath and all that. That was all the people responsible to make Greenfield more adapted to the climate risks that we see coming. And that work is absolutely critical, and there's a lot of role for the community in that work. Now let's talk about climate emergency preparation, which feels like it's a big jump, but obviously if you think about it a little bit, it's very connected. What is the city's role in emergency response? When I spoke to Chief Stragan, who's going to come and join us in a second, he reiterated something that the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Plan said, which is that not enough people know that we have an app, not a Greenfield alert, not an app, but a service, so that if there's an emergency and they put out some information, you can get to it. So everybody here who's got a cell phone who isn't on the Greenfield alert system, please raise your cell phones right now and sign up for this. And if you're part of an organization, it's really important for you to sign up for this because then you can involve your organization in a coordinated response to what comes out. So we're going to just have a moment of silence for the Greenfield Alert Service. And now to continue. I had an hour-long talk with Chief Strain, and I wish we had gone another hour, except that it broke my brain. But there's no way that in 10 minutes you can possibly get a sense of the depth of what he's been doing as an emergency management person all over the country, from Katrina, everywhere else, and how much he knows and how much he's able to do when he goes out of his Bruce Wayne costume and turns into Batman. But I've asked him to come here to talk about how has this climate crisis informed his work as an emergency response professional, and the same question that I've put to George: what are the things that the public can do to help us be more resilient to the climate crisis? Thank you, Chief Strain.
So thank you very much for the invite to come to speak today. I'm very passionate about the work that I do as not only the fire chief for the city of Greenfield, but also the emergency management director. Just real quick background about me: I've been involved with fire and emergency response for over 30 years. I am a operations sections chief for a Type 3 incident management team that has taken me across the country to large events. Recently, the North Carolina flooding events. I worked a couple weeks down there assisting communities like ours, trying to deal with the overwhelming response of an emergency caused by the climate. What I can tell you is every event that I've been involved with, there's a lot of criticism that comes very quickly after the event happens about the local, state, and federal responses. And I'm here to tell you that there are many, many, many thousands of people that this is what we do for a living. In Greenfield, we have 4 engine companies. We staff 2 of them during the day, during 24 hours a day, but we have 4 engines. The police department has about 8 cruisers. Think about the city of Greenfield and 83% of our roads impassable, and what 4 engine companies are going to do, and what DPW can do for that. Think about power to 90% plus of people in town, and that the power may be gone for a week or so. And then think about, are you prepared for that? Are you prepared for that? Because we are going to do everything that we can to help you. And we are going to do everything we can to restore life back to normal, but it's going to take time. The statistics that I said are real statistics that we faced in an event about 10 years ago for a thunderstorm wind event that came through town. There were 83% of the roads that were initially blocked. There was close to 100% without power. There were people that without power in our community that went on for 3 or 4 days. I need you to understand what our priorities are as emergency responders, so you can think about this, how important it is for you to be prepared for an event. Because as best of a job that emergency services can do at a state, local, and federal level, it's going to take time, and it's going to take a little bit of time. So let me explain what I mean by that. So when we have a large event come to town, and we've had several, and it seems like we're having more and more of those events happen regularly, the first priority for us is to handle the people that are in immediate life danger. They need to be rescued for whatever reason. And then we start working on trying to open roads. And what I mean by open roads is we go and we cut a path so a fire truck and ambulance can get through. Sometimes that can take a couple days just in that. That's the priority. Then the priority is to start restoring power, and we restore power based off of critical infrastructure and population and other things like that. If we have a large event like this, and I keep saying this, it could be days. And we'll get to help as much people as we can, but what can help us is if people were really prepared for an event that happened. Because we are limited in our size of what we can bring to the table. If we pull in state resources, it could be a day or two. If it's a widespread event, it could be even longer. Federal resources typically take a week to get on site before they start helping. And so that my message to everybody is what can you do to prepare for yourself? Are there things that you can do to watch out for you and your neighbor to get ready for an event? I will tell you, in my 30 years, we are seeing an increase in larger, more devastating events. Irene was a prime example. Irene was a hurricane that came up through here. People that lived in the north end of town probably didn't really experience anything with Irene. The southern end of town, where our rivers converge, our streams converge, we did. In the city of Greenfield alone, just the city, sustained $14 million in damages from that one event. I have last fall, in November, if you remember, if anybody is aware, we had some fires throughout the Commonwealth in the wooded areas. It was very dry, and we had fires all across the Commonwealth. We went and assisted several large fires outside of our community. One of the fires I went to was in the town of Munson. I've never seen a fire in the Commonwealth. I used to work as a wildland firefighter in my youth, and I've been over across the country and out west where I saw a big fire. The fire in Munson that I saw and how close it came to losing whole neighborhoods down there was unbelievable. It's fire activity we haven't seen in the Northeast for a while, and we're seeing it more and more. And I'm pointing this out because in November, when these fires happened, it was 50 degrees. If we had another 20 degrees on top of that, if that fire was in October, when we were at 70 or 80 degrees, it would have been disastrous. And it was close. And so this is a real thing with climate change or climate crisis. And we as emergency services are doing everything in our power to prepare for that and to help with that. In Franklin County, we've established wildfire specialized firefighters. That was kind of 5-10 years ago was kind of, wasn't really looked upon very well across the state because we don't see that fire activity. They were out all fall, and everybody was so pleased to have this crew. Franklin County, the smallest county in Massachusetts, is leading the way on wildland firefighting, emergency response, and things like that. So that's it. I could go on. We had an hour conversation. We could have gone on for hours. I'm super passionate with what I do. We are working every day, every hour of every day to make sure that we're preparing for the future, that we're preparing for what's, what could go bad. Rest assured, we have emergency-wide city plans. We update it constantly. We work on it constantly. The new firehouse, beautiful facility. The main training area, it also dubs as our EOC, Emergency Operations Center. We are working on those capabilities and staffing for that. And we are doing everything we can to keep everybody safe. With that said, I will say it again, prepare. You need to prepare for yourself, because as much as we're going to try to get to everybody, it may take us time if it's a citywide or beyond that event. So that's my big message today. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time, and I'm always available for questions and love talking about what I do. So thank you. So I was just asked to talk a little bit about the Emergency Operations Center. So has anybody had an opportunity to see your new firehouse, people that live in town. I encourage you to go see the new firehouse. It's a beautiful facility, but it was also built with some capabilities that we didn't have before. And the biggest one is that Emergency Operations Center. What is an Emergency Operations Center? And has the city of Greenfield never utilized it? And the short answer is yes. It plays a key role with emergency response within the city. And so what happens is that a citywide event happens, and it's an emergency that happens. All the big players within the city government come to this one area and handle the response and the recovery and make command level decisions at that Emergency Operations Center. If we think back to COVID, Greenfield, I don't know if everybody realizes this, but during the early stages of COVID, the first month or so, Greenfield had a very, very sad circumstance with COVID. There was an article from the Washington Post that put greater Greenfield area, which is Greenfield and their surrounding areas, in the top 7 of fatalities based off of population in the country. I don't know if people knew that. We were losing people to COVID at rates that still haunt me to this day. So what we did early on is before we even started seeing us get into that level, we opened up our Emergency Operations Center, and it was, our firehouse wasn't there at the time. We were in tents on Hope Street, and so we ran it out of the John Zahn Center. And that Emergency Operations Center ran for 8 months. The first 2 to 3 months as an emergency response center for the response, and then we shifted to a vaccine center. A vaccine center that your leaders, your mayor at the time and the health department at the time, really pushed to make sure that we had vaccines going out to the residents in our community, and our first responders were being protected at that time as well. The Emergency Operations Center is really an important part of the emergency response and recovery for any town. Ours now is a state-of-the-art facility. Again, if you have the opportunity to come and see the firehouse, you can go into our emergency operations center, which dubs as, seconds as our training room. But there's monitors in there, there's phone capabilities, there's radios, there's everything else. And so we are in a better place now to handle large-scale events should it come our way. We also are very big in supporting our neighbors. And so that could also function as a Franklin County EOC if necessary. We do a lot of coordination with our neighboring towns when there's a large scale event, but that's all done out of the Emergency Operations Center. Again, I'm super passionate about it. If you haven't seen that in a couple minutes we've been talking, but I implore everybody to come take a look at it and see what your resources for the city of Greenfield has. So,
See on the schedule, we are going to have a panelists Q&A soon, when you can ask all the hundreds of thousands of questions that I'm sure have already arisen. So make a note of them. You might forget them because I'm going to pour stuff down the fire hose again. So we're going to now shift to nonprofits with our third panelist. When you talk about a command post for an operations center, Chief Strand was talking to me about when there's an emergency, there's citizens like a national reserve. There's all these people who are ready to suddenly show up and play volunteer roles because they've had some training about it or they've been thinking about it. But actually, people will just show up anyhow. And folks like Chief Strand and the people he worked with can give orders to people who know to follow orders in an emergency, and a whole lot of stuff can happen very, very quickly. Like the size of the response to an emergency is much, much bigger than city government. And just hearing him tell the story of how that happened down in North Carolina, with those floods, it's very, very inspiring. Which feels like it's part of mutual aid is people being ready to go and show up like that. But there's a Signal chat. You guys are hearing a lot about Signal lately. It's not only used for bombing Yemen, where people write stuff about how they would like to help in emergency response to mutual aid. And some of them say, we don't really trust people in uniform because we've heard about times, Katrina, when the police were really nice to us or respectful to the different communities or racist or whatever. And that has nothing to do with the fire department here. But nonprofits play a very different role. Their primary responsibility is reaching out and connecting to vulnerable populations and other folks that they do. And they're very, very trusted and respected and gentle and not command-oriented. And it's critical to have their voices and their organizational capacity in a crisis, as critical as it also is to have the emergency response of the government. How can you coordinate those? Can you coordinate those? Should you coordinate those? What's all that? The jury is out depending on what community you talk to. To me, it seems like we really do need to have some coordination between those two because both need to do stuff together when there's a problem. And nonprofits have experience working with volunteer networks. Mutual aid organizations, as you'll see from this graph, they're called collectives because there's people getting together and do stuff. They did a survey of communities where there was a mutual aid collective and there was a crisis. And what they found was the nonprofits and the mutual aid collectives were the ones that had the most impact in the community responding to a crisis. Now, municipalities are not on this graph. So I'm sure that they would be a longer graph in places like Greenfield where we have an emergency operations director and center. But look at how far down the road you get before you start hitting the Red Cross and FEMA, right? So all we have is each other. But one of the big roles for each other is the nonprofits. Kirsten, who has by now left, and by the way, there is brownies and lemonade. So we'll go and have brownies and lemonade if you want them at any point today. Was one of the founders of the Franklin County Resource Network, which is all of our nonprofits, service providers getting together twice a month and saying, where are the needs we're seeing in the community? How can we work more together? And that's an incredible resource. But I'd like to call our third speaker, Emily Voss, particularly to connect with what Chief Strain was talking about those woods in North Greenfield, Berniston, that he sees as being a big threat, and what is the role of nonprofits in helping us take care of our human and natural resources and making us more resilient and maybe less likely to get in trouble. So Emily, please come on up.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for coming out. First, sound check. I have a quiet voice. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everybody can, that's awesome. Excellent. So my name is Emily Voss. I live here in Greenfield, and I work at Franklin Land Trust, which is based in Shelburne in Franklin County. We were founded in Ashfield and moved over. We almost got flooded and fell into the river and when Irene came through, so we had to move up Route 2 and back down Route 2. But I'm from Connecticut originally. I grew up at the base of, or the mouth of the Housatonic River, actually. So it's been really interesting moving to Massachusetts to learn about how much that river was affected by electrical plants and the pollution in the river at the mouth of it that me and my family experienced and had to not swim in it is something now that I can be part of the communities that are bringing back the restoration to the river, and it's neat to live near the Connecticut River. That's my home base now. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about myself because one of the pieces of climate response that we found to be really critical is not only the infrastructure and the conservation of lands that I'll talk about, but also the people. Because we are in a crisis also of people who can do the work to respond to all the things that we need. We have a lot of partnerships that we work on for conservation, but we also have partnerships that are focusing on mentorship and bringing people into environmental fields. So for all the work that you do, I think that's something that we really want to focus on as well. So I'm going to talk about 3 different strategies that we have that we respond to climate change with: planting, protecting, restoring, and then I'll get a little bit further into some of the partnerships that we do and the brass tacks of climate change impacts on our forest lands specifically, if we have time. So Franklin Land Trust, as I said, is a nonprofit. We started out as a very small organization with just 1 or 2 people and a lot of volunteers. We still have many, many, many volunteers. Over 100 volunteers help in our biggest fundraiser of the year. It's called D2R2, Deerfield Dirt Road Randonnée. That brings over 1,500 people, bicyclers from all over the country and from different countries to our neck of the woods to experience our landscape. And we often work with communities like Greenfield. A few years back, we had an opportunity to work with the Department of Conservation and Recreation on something called the Tree Planting in 3 Small Cities grant. It was U.S. Forest Service funds. And we worked with North Adams, Greenfield, and Montague, and brought in funds, trees that were purchased by Mass DCR, and then were planted by volunteers in each of those cities. Over 5 years, about 1,800 trees were planted. We worked really closely with the Greenfield Tree Committee that was talked about before, and through that grant effort, the nursery that the Greenfield Tree Committee operates now was created on Just Roots, the community farm here in Greenfield. I got involved with Greenfield Tree Committee, and since I live here, oh, did somebody have an involvement with that? Let's give a shout out. Yay, thank you. And so I feel really lucky to be in this really incredibly engaged community that has brought that to bear and has worked consistently on planting shade trees all over the community. Many of our neighborhoods are environmental justice communities in Greenfield. We've talked a lot about the income inequity that we experience here, and it's a reality for so many of the people we share. So shout out to Greenfield Tree Committee. That's another great organization to connect with. So in addition to planting in urban areas, we often do a lot of planting in more rural areas. One of the aspects of climate change is that not only are we seeing the impacts on human communities through infrastructure and flooding, we're also seeing devastation on natural communities. And for me, that's really essential. I'm a tree geek. I'm a licensed forester in Massachusetts. I studied trees. I'm passionate about it. And so doing conservation is something that means a lot to me. I can spend my 8 hours a day doing work that I feel like is giving back. And so the work that we do to conserve land is really trying to honor the fact that we all depend upon the natural earth. We forget that as humans. We think everything can be boxed and commodified, but when it comes down to it, the air that we breathe, the water that we use, that we drink every day, we depend on the natural world. So one of the ways that we can give back is to connect and to preserve and to conserve that land that's doing all that amazing work. So our organization, we've protected over 35,000 acres over the last 35 years that Franklin Land Trust has been around. We've done that through partnerships. We have to work with the people who are the stewards of the land. In most cases, that's private landowners. In our region, upwards of 75% of the land is privately owned. If you go further out west in our country, much more of the landscapes are owned by the public entities like the federal government, but here it's really about private landowners. We work with farmers to protect farms. Conservation restriction is the term that's usually used for forest and field, and then agricultural preservation restriction is what's used on a farm typically. And we're very lucky here in Massachusetts to have very strong partnerships between the Mass Department of Agriculture and, in the past at least, the federal government, which brought many funds, 50-50, to help farmers protect their land and be paid for that. Many times farms are in crisis, and you might be transferring from one generation to the next, and that's a point where a lot of times natural lands and farmlands are lost to development. So bringing those critical funds to be able to conserve those farms is important for our food resilience and our food safety for our communities here. And then we also work with state partners, Department of Conservation and Recreation, Department of Fish and Game, and other agencies. Many times there are people who wish to conserve their land, and then they, rather than keeping it in their own hands, they may donate it to a land trust like Franklin Land Trust, or it can be purchased by the state and create state forests, parks, recreation areas, or communities like Greenfield. Earlier, we got to hear about the Sustainable Greenfield working on the master plan. Another way that I help volunteer my time too is by working with another task force under the Sustainable Greenfield Committee, which is focusing on the open space plan here in Greenfield. So we're working to try and take the plans that have been made, figure out what the priorities are for conservation here, and in my view, that's critically integral with our climate change response. So we'll be definitely having conversations about how conservation can be done here in Greenfield to help make our streets more resilient and protected from flooding, as well as to connect farmlands and other things that we rely on. Let's see. So Franklin Land Trust, along with conserving 35,000 acres that are either held by private landowners or owned by the state or by communities like Greenfield. We also own about 1,200 acres that we manage and feed. And on some of those properties, like the Greenfield Conservation area in Heath and the Guyette Farm, both of which are former dairy farms in Plainfield, we've done plantings for pollinators and removed invasives, both of which contribute to the third crisis that we are experiencing here, which is one of biodiversity. Climate change, it's great that Ron talked a little bit earlier about the specific ways that climate change is manifesting here with increased temperatures and more tempestuous weather. And along with that, we are seeing a decline not only in the endangered species that someone spoke before that we've been trying for so long to protect, but also even in the common species that we see out in the natural lands. So we're also experiencing a loss of abundance of those species that are with us every day. So the third place, the strategy that we really work on is restoration. Trying to work with natural lands that we manage and supporting people who are individual, private, family stewards of the land to get the technical assistance and connect with those professionals that we're trying to bring more of into the environmental fields so that they can learn about what the needs are of nature and so we can all work together to be adaptive and to respond to them. So to that end, my organization has a subsidiary called the Massachusetts Woodlands Institute, which is dedicated to helping people connect with stewardship opportunities. We have a contract with the Department of Conservation and Recreation that connects people with foresters who can provide long-term management for their forest lands. And we've been lucky enough through that partnership to work with a broader partner of nonprofits and researchers to create forest-informed management plans that take the data and the science that we're all kind of grappling with and being worried by and put it into practical applications that we can use on the ground. Whether it's making sure that the seeds that we're using are native plants that are from this county or this region so that the native species can rely on them, to learning what the vulnerabilities are of the species in the forests that we're stewarding so that we can know what new pests and pathogens are coming down, how we can help the forest be more healthy to respond to them, and to continue to store and sequester carbon over time. So, is it around 10 minutes? Great. Thank you so much for listening.
I need to apologize for the whiplash, the conceptual whiplash that we've just been through. Initially, I was going to have all the speakers speak at the end and then do the Q&A. But then I saw how long I was talking, and I said, it'd be better to insert them in the moments when the thing we were talking about was related to why they were here. But Emily's thing was in relation to both fire, so I put her after Chief Strahan, but also very largely over something that isn't emergency response, but rather adaptation. So the whole rubric that I put together probably made no sense. I'm going to try to pull some of that back. The only other tie I can make to, and Nancy being here with the Greenfield, there are a lot of people who aren't thinking with a wide enough frame, see the natural world and the human world as being different. And then obviously we have to eat, but also we have to be free of fire and disease. But also, we have to restore things that get broken in crises. And so having people who are caring for and knowing how to restore is really critical. There are some students from Greenfield Community College. Can you guys put your hands up if you're still here? So there they are. And they are going to do a presentation inspired by a permaculture concept called gilding at the end of this show. Has Daniel Bakken shown up yet? Okay, good. So you guys are going to have to stand for all of that. So that'll be fun. Okay, back to the fire hose. What is the public's role in emergency response? We've been telegraphing this for a while. I don't know what accessory this is, but hopefully we're still showing it. So, as Chief Strand said, having a go bag, if you have to leave your house and you have the things that you need, is really important. By the way, this is on a federal website, and on the top of the website it says we're updating to comply with President Trump's executive orders. And that's just a way of starting to say that, one of the emergencies we're dealing with right now is not only nonprofits who have suddenly been denuded all their funds, like the Connecticut River Conservancy, which we read about recently, millions and millions, but also just having basic resources online, which will just be suddenly gone. So I just like to take this moment to have people think about, can they go and find instructions for what to put in a go bag in case they have to run out? And also think about getting the soup in the basement and all that. When there is a need for donations and volunteers, maybe prepare for that. Maybe go find out where would you go and volunteer. Emergency Medical Reserve Corps, Christy Moore organizes the cooling centers and heating centers here. If anybody is friends with her, I want to talk to her. Anybody here? Okay, excellent. What's your name?
Joan Pillsbury.
Joan, thank you, Joan. Can you connect us somehow? Excellent. I sent some emails, but some people don't have time for the emails. Mutual aid is another way. So the first way I was talking about is getting a little pre-training for being able to be an emergency responder of some kind, whether it be medical or donating or whatever. But then the other is just the kind of connections. Yes?
Not everybody's medically prepared. You can train other ways. Yeah.
Right. They have video trainings. You do the pre-video training, and then you sign up and say, I did the video training. And then you're in a database that the Emergency Medical Reserve Corps, which I'm sure is part of what Chief Strand does. You're on the same data. You guys work with the same database when people go and sign up and say, here are the things I can do in an emergency. Do you guys work with the same one?
No.
They're different.
Anyway, it's called Cyber.
Okay, anyway, so there's stuff. So mutual aid, like in COVID, where we're just able to show up for each other for whatever we need. Do you know what the vulnerabilities are of the people in your neighborhood? We do, because during COVID we got to know each other, but not all neighborhoods did that, maybe. So I'm singing out to Redistro over here, and Sarah Brown, who is the new chair of our Unhoused Committee. What's the formal name of it?
Unhoused Community Ad Hoc Task Force.
Oh yes, the Unhoused Community Committee Ad Hoc Task Force. We have a lot of folks who, by the grace of our fire chief and others, are allowed to actually live outside and have fires, which are always allowed, by the rivers. And then when the rivers go and wash all their stuff away, they're kind of in trouble. So having the town just start to take care of them a little bit more is a really good thing. And then many of us have lost our jobs, not me, because of things that are going on at the federal level. And suddenly people are finding themselves homeless and weren't before. It's a whole new world for them. And so this whole mutual aid response is really critical. And it's a part of our society that few of us are hip to until we start getting hip to it. There is this Signal chat, not for bombing Yemen, but for people saying what they're able to do in mutual aid. And if you want to take your phones out and do this, you'll learn how to get to that particular chat, which is kind of inspiring. Because you hear people from all over the valley saying, here's what I'm able to do in a crisis. I don't know how you operationalize that. I've said on the chat, I'm not sure how we operationalize that. Should we make a database? People are like, no, don't make a database. But it gives you the quality of people thinking about how can we be ready. Different communities are making their own signal chats for mutually emergency response. Greenfield doesn't have one yet. I was holding back doing that myself. But we should have one. So anybody who likes to make signal chats, it can be really great to have one for Greenfield emergency preparation and mutual aid. Okay. So now to the Climate Resilience Hub, why Resilient Greenfield is showing up. What can we do? I mean, we already have an emergency response center. So one of the things that a Resilience Hub is supposed to do is to create an emergency response center, but we have one. Another thing we already have is places where you can find, anyway, there's this network of climate resilience hubs that is supported by the Better Future Project, which also supports 350 Mass. They're all over, and we want to work with emergency managers, nonprofits, and mutual aid groups to educate the public about what they do, and then to help them coordinate together for preparedness. Because not everybody has a chance to do all that coordination. Chief Strain pointed to this manual that would be like, this high of pages, dwarfing the master plan, George. And how do you can't read that thing in the middle of an emergency and know what's going on. Like over practice, you learn the things that are there. You could go check an index and open it up. But it's really, the way that we can prepare ourselves is by finding our own little ways in. And I think that as a peer-to-peer community of those who say we want to be a learning community and organizing community, we can start doing that work together, inspire ourselves to do that work together slowly over time. So there's 3 support modes for a resilience hub. There's the everyday mode of this kind of preparatory educational work and organizing work, delivering prepared messaging to the community, like that little bit about the Greenfield Alert, working with leaders to share information as it's happening right now, and then supporting and promoting efforts in public climate emergency preparedness and mutual aid. When there's a disruption, a gathering place, assessing impact, informing response, we already have that from the town. But maybe I don't know, maybe there's some ways in which the town doesn't interface with mutual aid organizations and nonprofits. Maybe that's something that Resilient Greenfield could do for them. We haven't had the convo yet, but according to this Resilience Hub model, it's something for people to do to help out. And then in recovery, helping fix things that have gone wrong and helping people get their lives back together again, and that's a very big part for nonprofits to be doing. But again, coordinating them together, not just in their silos, is something that we can be doing. So just in brief here, peer-to-peer learning and organizing community, maintaining a website where the work that we do exists, but websites mean nothing unless people are using them. So at least for the people who join the Resilience Greenfield, the Resilience Hub, they will be able to write to that website because it's a Google website and everybody can write to it. It's a sort of shared area where we're going to keep track of stuff. And then when we're helping other people who aren't part of this Resilience Hub, we know that we have a place to go refer to those resources that we know are there. And then mapping coordination paths and needs between municipal nonprofits and mutual aid groups. So yeah, this is the money shot for the slide show that we have here. That's what we really want to remember that we're up to. We're going to end today with a tiny little touch of an unconference. And an unconference is one where people get together to teach each other and learn from each other. Where they say, here's what I want to learn. Anybody know how to teach that? Here's what I want to talk about. Anybody want to facilitate that discussion? And then off we go to the different rooms that are available where we've just assigned people to go. It's not a big pre-prepared event. You can find out how to get to that website through the climate tab in the beginning of the middle of the Resilient Greenfield site. And you can read news about climate stuff that's been happening so people can see what's going on, both the bad and the good. And then over here is the volunteer network. This is what we did in the morning. And it's another way of coordinating between nonprofits, because all the nonprofits that joined the Resilient Greenfield Volunteering Network, which it's a described on the site, this is now a platform that we can use to connect with them, where they can see each other, where they can message each other, and where individual citizens can go and see other people. I don't know exactly how it will all work, but it's a resource we didn't have before. So now what I'd like to do is to have this panel Q&A. So if the panelists could come back up and come and join us. And Nancy, I'm going to put you on the spot. Would you be willing to answer questions also? No? Okay, that's fine.
Panelists can also start off.
Sure, this is on?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make a brief comment related to each of the other speakers, what they had shared. When you talked, Chief Strahan, about the wildfires, I just wanted to recommend a book to people. It's called Fire Weather. Don't know if anyone's aware of this. I can't remember the author's name. Easily searchable, obviously. It starts with an event that happened in Alberta in Canada, and it expands it to the type of climate change we're talking about and the conditions being such that these kind of events are being so much more common. And so when I hear all the stuff about the Western wildfires, it all is predicted by that book. And at the end, it talks about the awareness of the impact of emissions on climate change going back over 100 years. And in the 1950s, that there were bipartisan talks in Congress about the concern about the very thing we're dealing with now, of the impact of carbon emissions. It's a really empowering, sad, obviously, but it's a very empowering with knowledge about the background of this. That's one thing. And the other thing I wanted to, you mentioned, Emily, about the Open Space Task Force. And I just wanted to give a brief context for that. So one of the recommendations in the master plan was to have an open space commission for Greenfield. And so SGIC had a few years, I think, in a row recommended that. And the mayor wasn't prioritizing that. So we took the initiative last year to make a subcommittee of SGIC that was the Open Space Task Force. So just to try to move that forward. So that's one example of trying to be creative when the plan as it was didn't play out as hoped, but not to try to give up and try to find a creative way to do that. Thank you, sir. That's great.
It's a great opportunity to do my work and then connect that knowledge with the efforts of the town to figure out what parts of the town need to be conserved and how they can contribute to making the town more resilient.
Yes, I have a question for Emily. I heard in passing you mention concern about fires in North Greenfield and Bernardston. Someone had said before you came up, can you speak to that at all? As a resident of North Greenfield, I'd like to be aware of what the risks might be.
I think I need to pass that to Chief Strain.
Sure. I'd be happy to answer that. Simply put, there's more woods in the north end of town. And so there's, when we think about wildland fires, we typically don't think of the Northeast. We don't think of, large fires that could easily get out of control, which in my career has been true. Until the last few years, where we've seen some pretty interesting dynamics with fire activity that I personally have been to. There are things you can do to prepare. The first one is just be informed, right? Fire activity out in the wood or a wildland is not going to happen overnight. Conditions have to be right. It has to be dry for a long period of time. You have to have sustained wind. You have to have temperature. You have to have topography. There's a bunch of things that go into making the perfect storm, if you will, to have a fire that would get out of control. What we recommend, and they push this a lot in the West, but we don't talk about it a lot in the Northeast, is there's really a rule of thumb where if you can keep 30 feet plus, 30 to 70 feet of open space around your house that doesn't have a lot of vegetation or a lot of combustibles that will burn, that's going to put your home in a lot better place than people that have growth right up to their house. So that's, I think, how you can prepare for that. I don't think that there's a huge risk for wildland activity where we see catastrophic things like, out in California and Malibu and Hawaii, but we are certainly getting to that point where that risk is increasing, and the best thing you can do is the preparedness is to just keep combustibles, away from your house.
Is there a current fire ban, outdoor fire ban in Greenfield?
There is not. So the state allows open burning during a certain time period. That time period we're in the middle of right now, it goes from January 15th to the end of April. The control for the fire activity is to burn off brush and things like that for people to clean up their yards. Typically, we don't have a lot of problems with it. Sometimes we do. It is permitted through your local fire department, but the regulations for that fall under the Department of Environmental Protection. We're the enforcement side of it with it. It is interesting, though, because the environmental protection and the fire side don't really see eye to eye when it comes to the open burning laws. And for example, today, it's wet out there, and it's the ground is wet, the leaves are wet. Perfect day for the fire department to say, go ahead and burn, the risk is low. The environmental side of the house says, well, because it's wet, you're going to have more smoke, you're putting more particulates up in the air, not a good day to burn. The best day to burn is when it's hot and it's dry and windy. That's terrible for the fire department. So it's balancing that out, and it really puts your local fire department in a really tough spot because they're the ones that have to make that final call of whether or not it's permitted. We follow the standard set by the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Bureau of Fire Control. They come out and they say, the weather conditions are good today. Yes, you can burn, or, it's a hazard. You can't. In addition to our burn season that we have right now, the fire codes have changed and said that you can have a recreation fire. What's a recreation fire? Recreation fire is basically a campfire that's like a 2x2 area that you can go and enjoy a nice little outside fire. We deal with a lot of nuisance fires all the time because even though you can have a recreation fire, it doesn't give you the permission for your smoke to drift into somebody else's house. And so we do a lot with neighbor disputes on that. In addition to that, we have a large unhoused population within the city. We can't put out a cooking fire. It's the method to cook food and things like that. So that puts us in an interesting spot too, especially when the conditions are dangerous to have that fire. So it's stuff that we try to balance out. We're not always perfect with it, but we do our best job. But again, if there was a comment made to me earlier, if regulations is something that people are interested, it's not really the fire department regulations, it's the Department of Environmental Protection.
Yeah, I was going to ask that because I asked you that. I feel like in this day and age, we might want to write to the call the EPA because I think what you were saying, we're at a point where just the public, having that ability to go out and burn in their backyard, and we don't know the circumstances and what they're doing who they are. It feels way too much for me as a homeowner. I'm not a big fan. So where you're saying EPA is it's better on a dry day and you guys, it's better on a wet day. How about no day for the public? Which is what I'm gonna, try to write to them and talk about, because I don't feel the need to burn things, and maybe there's a place where the public can bring them and they can be safely burned. I'm also not a big fan of the, outdoor barbecue things, because often we've lived in places where we have to close our windows all day, because we can't, you know, there's, the smoke's coming in and it's hard to regulate for you. It's a lot more work for your group. So anyway, we'll hopefully write to the EPA and talk about stuff like that.
I should have been a little bit clearer about what you actually can burn. And whether it's a recreation fire or whether it's in the brush season that we have now, it is brush. It's not stumps, it's not leaves, it's not building material, it's not plastics, it's not cloth, it's brush, twigs and small sticks and things like that. And again, once we get out of the brush season where it's permissible to burn, the recreation fires by code are supposed to be no bigger than 2 by 2. That's a very, that's a campfire. So.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Eliza. I had a question around what both the municipality and nonprofits in the area are prepared to do for disabled people and elderly during disaster response. And that is something that has been very much left out a lot in many conversations. So I would really love to hear what is happening in Leader to ensure that our disabled community members, those who may have a language or other disability issue, that there is going to be a way to make sure they're not being left behind. Thank you.
I guess I'll take that one. Great question. So in part of our emergency plans that we have for the city of Greenfield, we have a pretty big network of shelter plans that spells out where emergency shelters will be set up during an event. Our shelters are geared towards and typically have been filled when we've had to open it with elderly and people that need assistance. And so we build that into our plan to make sure that those facilities are appropriate and set up. In addition to that, when there's an event in town, we work very closely with our partners in Greenfield Housing and some other agencies, Greenfield Gardens, other non-governmental groups to do what we can to provide whatever needs that typically they may have. It's our housing developments that we have within the city that poses our biggest challenges, because most residents, may have a fireplace, may have other means of keeping warm, where some of our apartment buildings, they don't. And that's typically the population that we see when we open a shelter. In addition to that, we encourage everybody in town to go on to Community Connect through the fire department, a web page that we have where you can actually put all your information in there. So if you have a pet, if you have a disability, if you need assistance, if you, depend on oxygen that runs on power, you can put whatever you want in this program, and then we have it as a database for when, God forbid, there's an event, and we can pull up that information. And anybody can put that information in and make us better available to know the needs responding. In addition to that, you can always, in Triad within the town, within the sheriff's office, really works with our seniors to make sure that their information is put into our 911 system, so that when they call 911, there's a message that says, hey, there's this condition at this house you're going to with this resident, be aware of it. There's things like that we use to prepare for that. But our vulnerable population and our elder population is one of the top priorities when it comes to the planning of an actual response during an emergency. I hope I answered the question.
I'll actually follow up, excuse me, on that question. In my day job, I work in mental health, and I wonder if there are particular provisions to accommodate service dogs or emotional support animals.
That's a great question. So, I love all these questions because it's been in my wheelhouse for many years. So the answer to that is yes, we take care of animals and they don't have to be service animals. So when we open up a shelter within the city, or if it's a Red Cross certified shelter, meaning that the city puts it on, but the Red Cross comes in and helps out with the organization, we have to provide a place for animals. And so our primary shelter that we have, which is the middle school, part of the planning is there's a whole section that's dedicated just for the pets. Because what we've learned in emergency services from Katrina and since moving forward, that pets are a family and people aren't going to leave their pets behind. I have a 2.5-year-old golden doodle that is, you know, my family. And if you think I'm going to leave my pet behind, it's not going to happen. So emergency preparedness people from Katrina learned some really hard lessons about that. And so yes, we have places and we set up areas specifically for pets because we know people aren't going to leave their pets. And we don't want people left behind and put themselves in danger because they don't want to leave the pets. We also have a bigger plan where if it was a larger scale emergency, where we work with some other organizations just to set up pet shelter. So it's a great question.
I have a comment too, thinking about, I'm realizing that I'm more in the resilience part of the spectrum of response than the disaster response, but that's what the groups that I'm engaged with are. And in that vein, tree planting is a really important resilience practice that has a great impact on people living in communities, especially people who are in less forested areas or less shade-tree areas, which is usually disproportionate in higher and lower income areas. So, and statistics that are helpful are that if you have shade trees and if you have parks and green areas, it can reduce the temperature from 10 to 20 degrees on the hottest days. So it's nice, it looks pretty, and also it's a critical resource for people to be able to get through the highs of temperatures that we're experiencing now. And can make you more resilient in storms as well. So our natural community in our urban communities is a really important resource to invest in.
Is there anyone who is holding on to a question and wants to give it before we close this part? Okay, thank you so much, Anna.
Offer
Yes.
opportunities for people to get involved. Thanks. One thing I wanted to mention is there is one of the public positions on the SGIC is unfilled at this point. And in looking over the range of skills and knowledge on the list in the charter, the committee was feeling we could use someone who has the knowledge of food systems and way to build local food security. So if you are or know someone who is a Greenfield resident and has those skills, that would be great. You would have to contact the mayor because the mayor makes these appointments.
Have you contacted Rachel's Table?
What's that?
Rachel's Table, have you contacted them?
I know Nancy, who's on SGIC, was doing a lot of that. I don't know if that's one of the people.
Thank you for that.
Thanks.
And I just wanted to make a little pitch as well. FERCOG, there's at least one representative here, it does a lot of amazing work, grants, community outreach, administering grants for organizations and for communities. So they do a lot in terms of helping build resilience and have many opportunities going on right now. So if you want to learn more, reach out to FERCOG. And also, if you're interested in learning more about the impact of climate change on forests and natural areas, the U.S. Forest Service at this point still has a really great resource in the Tree Climate, Tree Climate Atlas. And I have some handouts that I brought that I'd be happy to give folks in the sustainability group or others who are interested to learn more. And please feel free to reach out to me at Master Lens or Franklin Land Trust to get involved or to learn more about all these things. And I'll be here, obviously, on various committees and hope to work with many of you on these issues.
Thank you.